Hey everybody, Vince August here. Sorry for the delay. I know I'm starting a little bit late. Um, had a meeting with regards to what's going to be happening here with VNN moving forward. Hopefully by next week, this is all going to look very different. This will look like what it's going to be, which is a studio. So we had a meeting that ran late, but thank you for those of you that hung out and waited to see this live. As I promised, we're going to be Wednesdays live, 7:30. One of the things I wanted to cover in this video, I'm going to jump right into it, is as you can see by the topic, I don't understand one thing that either the media does, celebrities do, talk shows do, a lot of things do, which is when something happens, we immediately have to compare it to something else to give it like this heightened significance. So, for example, what happened last week at the Capitol on Wednesday, we saw this weekend Arnold Schwarzenegger came right out and made a comparison to Crystal Knock. And his big thing was, how this reminded him of what happened in Austria and Crystal Knock and everything that happened with the Jews. And I was just like, first of all, no, it's a bad comparison. And I'll let you look up Crystal Knock. I don't want to get into why it's a bad comparison. That's not the point. The point is, why can't we look at what happened and break down what happened rather than make a point of saying, this is how big of a moment this was, and we're going to compare it to another huge moment in history just so we can show you how big of a moment. Like the one thing that drives me absolutely insane is when everything is compared to Hitler. Everything is compared to Hitler's Germany. Everyone, as soon as a bad person comes along, we compare it to Hitler. Look, no, stop that. Okay, there was only one Hitler. Thank God. Thank God. Within the last 100 years, obviously, before that, you had other, horrific rulers going from Napoleon, going from Genghis Khan. Hitler just had, of course, the advantages of technology to carry out the horrific things that he did and the means that he did. But we can't compare everything that happens. The Holocaust is the Holocaust. Leave it alone. Hitler is Hitler. Leave it alone. Even things like 9/11. 9/11 is 9/11. Why do we have to compare things to 9/11? Pearl Harbor was Pearl Harbor. Everyone's like 9/11 was like Pearl Harbor. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was two different things. One is a military base. One is, but this need to constantly compare our history to give the present moment greater significance so that it's almost like don't dismiss what we're seeing. And the thing that makes me laugh about it is don't dismiss what we're seeing. We're seeing it 24 hours a day. All we're doing is having constant coverage about it. Why do we need to make sure that we want to make sure that, this doesn't become trivialized. It's like, how can it become trivialized? It's literally being covered by everyone. So this notion that we have to compare things to make everyone aware of how significant it is does a couple things that right off the bat. So as soon as you say, look, what happened at the Capitol building is like Crystal Knock, then you look up Crystal Knock. If you know what it is, you say, no, it's not that. You know what? No, see, here we go. Now we're going to overblow what this is. No, let's just talk about what it was and let's go over what it was and how it happened, how we got to that point, and how we can prevent it from happening again. Because again, each moment is a learning moment. And I don't think you can learn from these moments if you treat it like something else and try to make it, appear to be something different. So that I have a big problem with when we do that. I have some notes. I want to cover things. Hey, Jess, thanks for checking in. The other thing. Oh, this is another thing that I saw that, when I saw how the Congress people reacted and we're seeing stories about how scared they were and how terrifying this was, how people reacted, and immediately they're taking swift action. And I thought to myself, wow, if we only did that when schools got shot up, and now it seems like, well, now that you know what it feels like hiding under a desk, maybe now we can start talking about, how kids feel like when they're in a school and that situation happens and how we can address all of the security measures that you're now going to put in place for yourselves, but yet it doesn't happen for the public. So that was another one of those things that kind of got me going where I was just like, oh, so all of a sudden when it happens to you, now we have to take swift action. Now we're calling the National Guard. The National Guard were called stormtroopers in June and July. Now all of a sudden we like the National Guard and we need the National Guard. So the hypocrisy that's coming about here is pretty crazy, and it's abounds on each side. And listen, again, I've said this over and over again. I am not partial to Democrats or Republicans. I've called out both sides constantly, but the hypocrisy is really getting out of control lately. So I think the two things that we need to do, the first thing that we need to do is stop comparing things to historical events to try to give them greater context when the context is already great. The other thing that we have to look at is, when you start saying about how terrified you were, and how swift the action is now because it happened to you, yet when it happens to ordinary people, it seems like we pump the brake, we take our time. It's a lot more lip service than it is actual action. So that was the other thing. Um, Here's another thing that I'm hearing about lately is, and I had a conversation with somebody talking about how, Trump is leaving the White House and how he's going to go down in history as the worst president ever. And again, it's this comparison thing. And it's this thing of, this is literally going to be the worst president ever. And I'm like, okay, again, context. Because when you think of it this way, how about every president before Abraham Lincoln was a president of a country that had slavery and did nothing about it? Okay, let's start with that comparison if you want to compare things. The other thing is George W. Bush and his cronies, went to war with a sovereign nation in Iran, destabilized Iraq, destabilized the entire Middle East, and we've been in that war pretty much ever since. So, when you start talking about things and making comparisons and right away, passing judgment, I understand right now we have this visceral feeling for Donald Trump. I get it. But when we start jumping to say things, I don't know. I think George W. Bush destabilized it. And then Liz Cheney had the nerve, by the way, to come out and chastise, Donald Trump and the things he did. Really, Liz Cheney, you're going to moralize? How about talking to your father and what he dragged us into with George Bush in the Middle East with his weapons of mass destruction and this endless war that went on and on and on, all to fight for what? Something that happened with his father years ago. So again, we need to stop trying to make comparisons with everything and just judge things in the moment that you're in. Okay, let's not do false comparisons. Let's not go back in history and make sure. Look, slavery was slavery. It was horrific. We stay. What are we going to do? Start comparing things to slavery now? We're going to compare everything to what happened to African Americans that were brought to this. No, no one's doing that. No one should make these false comparisons. We need to stop it. I don't think it's productive, and I think we wind up losing the message and losing what we're trying to learn from the current moment. You don't learn from the current moment if you try to treat it as something else. So that's another thing I wanted to talk about. Let's point everyone to the. Oh, here's the other thing. I'm sorry, I have notes I wanted to prepare to talk about. Here's this other thing that we're seeing now too. Everyone gets painted with the same broad brush at this point. So basically, here's what I'm seeing in the news. If you are in any way associated with Donald Trump, even if you voted for him, okay, that makes you culpable and responsible. It was foreseeable that what happened last Wednesday would eventually happen, and any association you have with him immediately makes you responsible for his actions. And this broad brush that people are painting with, that all Republicans, I mean, I even heard AOC basically say that southern states that vote Republican are basically, being suppressed. So even people that are voting for Republicans in their own states, it's like we have to save them from themselves. So we don't even want to. So we're talking about voter fraud and voter this and voter that. Yet we have someone like AOC who comes out and says, you know what, these red states, we have to save the red states and turn them blue, even though this is what people want. Because what people do is they immediately tie voting Republican to voting for Trump. And what a lot of people don't realize is when people vote, they vote on like two or three issues. People only have two or three issues they care about, whether it's taxes, whether it's the economy, whether it's gun rights, whether it's abortion. That people don't really have this litany of reasons of why they vote for specific candidates. Most of them vote for parties. And what the party has become like a team. Okay, you root on your team. You root for the Yankees. You don't root for individuals that play for the Yankees because they come and go. They get traded off. So you root for your team. You vote for your team. And the fact that Donald Trump happened to be that team this time around, you can't paint with that broad brush that everyone that voted for Trump or had anything to do with Trump is immediately associated with what happened last Wednesday when those people stormed the Capitol. Because if that's the case, then you could do that with a lot of things. So when Bernie Sanders said some of the things he said, and then someone went to a field and actually started shooting at members of Congress and shot Steve Scalise, we could say, well, if you're a Bernie bro, you're responsible for that. Or when Barack Obama or anybody came out and said what they did about police, systemic racism, police, and then people go out and shoot cops. So we make those people responsible for that. And listen, when it comes to free speech, when it comes to the First Amendment and what Trump said that day, again, look, I can put on my legal hat and can get into a whole legal thing with regards to Brandenburg versus Ohio and Indiana versus Hess. This is how I broke into law. This is what got me my job at the Attorney General's office while I was in law school. There's the criminal standard and then there's the political standard. It doesn't meet the criminal standard because to assume that what Donald Trump said that day incited people to what? All of a sudden use the pipe bombs and the zip ties that they brought with them. So you mean to tell me if Donald Trump that day would have said, hey, listen, guys, you know what? Everyone, we're going to be peaceful today. No one's going to do anything. Whatever we do, let's just do this the right way. You mean to tell me all those people that brought pipe bombs and zip ties and all of the stuff that they found, they were just going to be like, you know what? Ah, Trump's right. Let's stand down. Let's not do what we were going to do. I think you have to realize that people that went there that day to carry out what they were going to carry out were going to do it no matter what. And we saw that all summer long. We saw people that were involved with peaceful protests. We saw politicians marching with Black Lives Matter members. We saw people painting on the street, Black Lives Matter. And then what would happen? Sundown would come, and then a different element would get involved, and things would degenerate. So we have to be really careful with painting with that broad brush, both sides. I refuse to believe. I'm sorry. I have faith in people, and maybe it's just because I have faith in people. I don't think we are ever the worst of our associations. So I'm not going to paint 74 million people that voted for Trump all what attacked that building. I'm just not going to do it. Like I'm not going to paint, the 80 million people that voted for Biden are people that set fires and set up chop zones all summer. I'm just not going to do it. We're never the worst of our smallest part. And I felt that way after 9/11. I refuse to lump all people of a Muslim faith involved with terrorism. I'm just not going to do it. So I think we need to be more careful and not do that. Other things I want to do, sorry about the reflection, but I need to read. Without compromise. Yeah, so here's the other thing. So we're talking about, we have people saying that, the rhetoric's got to stop and Biden's going to be the great unifier. You don't unify without making concessions. And the problem right now is nobody wants to make any concessions. Nobody wants to give an inch. And I've always said this. Now, for example, I'm a gun owner. I own guns. I like to go shooting. And, I tell people, look, there's got to be certain concessions when it comes to safety for people. And I understand, that we have people out there, that we have school situations that I just brought up earlier. And I've always said, look, you know what? People want to own an AR-15, and I've shown people different caliber bullets. And I'm like, point out the one that comes from an AR-15, and people get it wrong because they pick out the scariest looking bullet. And I tell people, look, I understand that you have to make concessions. And I've always said I'm willing to make concessions with regards to gun ownership. And I don't hunt. All I shoot is paper and steel. And I hope I never have to shoot anything that has a pulse. I am more than happy shooting nothing but paper and steel for the rest of my life. And if someone said to me, listen, your AR-15, since you can only use it at a range, how about this? How about you keep it at the range and the only time you can work with the gun is at the range? I'd be like, okay, fine. If I know that's going to keep society safe, if I know that sacrifice will keep people safer, I'm willing to make that concession. I'm all for longer waiting periods for guns. But no one seems to ever want to give an inch on their part. Like even last week when I talked about some of the rhetoric with regards to house rules and how people wanted to change the words mother and father to parent. And I said, well, why change the words? Why not just add parent. So the words are now mother, father, and parent. And why we're adding parent is to be more inclusive. Why do we have to get rid of words? And it's like, well, what's the difference? Why are you so offended? And it's like, no, 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 no. Again, this shouldn't be a fight. What I'm saying is neither one of us has to give in. We can include everything and we're all better for it. But again, if no one's going to give an inch, we're not going to get anywhere. And everyone's going to have to start giving inches. I hate to say it, but we're all going to have to start giving ground if we're going to get anything accomplished. This notion that Biden's going to come in and people are just going to start getting along because Biden's coming. No, there's going to have to be concessions. And if we're not willing to make concessions, we're not going anywhere. And listen, with this impeachment, I have to be honest. I'm looking at Democrats and I'm scratching my head saying, why? Why? If you know that right now the Republicans are fighting amongst themselves over whether or not Donald Trump is a true Republican and whether or not they want to associate with him, if you see them fighting amongst themselves, why would you want to impeach him? I'd say, you know what? He's yours. Take him. Go ahead. That's right. Donald Trump is a Republican, everybody. He's one of them. Let them figure it out. This way, in 4 years, if he wants to run, maybe the Republicans can say, hey, listen, Don, you know what? You're going to have to run as an independent. You're not one of us. The party's fractured. It's better for you. So, and again, with the impeachment thing right now, I mean, didn't we learn from a year ago before the pandemic started when we were occupied with impeachment? Our government can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. They can't. So now we're going to fall back into the impeachment trap when we're trying to distribute vaccines. Really? Is now the time for this? I don't think so. Just my, take on it. And with regards to, some of the reaction with, why people attacked and why the frustration. Look, I will say this. I understand, and I had a back and forth with one of you on one of the threads. Look, I understand voting irregularities. I'm not saying, okay, that there weren't voting irregularities. I think the notion of starting voting for the presidency in August, 2 months before the election, and turning our election into I don't like it because basically what it does is it turns our elections into the NCAA tournament. It becomes March Madness. It's like this fall madness thing where we try to start it earlier and earlier. Because I honestly believe all this country's become lately is an election and campaigns, elections and campaigns. That's all the politicians seem to do. They run for office, win, then tell you that they need money to run for office again and win. And what do they do in between? What, nothing? I mean, so I don't want this to turn into that. So look, we saw in 2000 Florida had problems with their election system. Say what you want about Florida, they fixed it. We definitely saw problems. Pennsylvania passed laws that it turns out they didn't have the right to pass. And then if you challenge the law, you didn't have standing to challenge it beforehand. And now afterwards, it's too late. Look, states have to figure out their irregularities. States have to figure out how to make sure they get their elections right. People are talking about IDs for vaccines, yet no IDs for voting cards and things like that. We have a mess. We have to fix it. But at the same time, people have to move on from the last election. I understand there's a lot of frustration on the right, but I've seen this over and over. I saw this when Clinton won. Oh my God, the world is going to end. Then when Bush won and they stole the election from Gore, oh my God, the world is going to end. And look, they actually went to war in the Middle East and destabilized the region. If there was ever a war, world was going to end, that was going to be it. Then Obama won and people lost their minds. And then, Trump won and it was the screaming and yet here we are. We're still here. Yeah, we're in a pandemic. Yeah, we're going through. But you know what? This is what humans do. We adapt. We get through things. So I've seen this and I saw this end of the world thing too with every mayor in New York City that gets elected. The world, it's always the worst situation ever, and we're never going to get through this. And one side is always pissed off, and the other. I mean, everyone needs to take a beat and say, look, I'm an independent. I can tell you right now, I voted for Ross Perot in 92, lost. I voted for him again in 96. I voted for Ralph Nader, one of the elections. I voted for Stein the last time in 2016 because I didn't like either one of them. So, and because I know New Jersey's going to go blue anyway. So most of the times the candidates I vote for lose. My third party candidates always lose. So I never get my president, yet the one thing I always say is whoever wins, that's my president. I've never said not my president. I'm sorry. I refuse to say that because you know what? When the system is what the system is, I accept it. Until we change the system, that's not to say we can't fix the system. system needs fixing, but I respect at least our system and our nation. Um, Last thing, here's this one I've been dying to get to. This is the interesting thing about where our politics are today. When did Republicans, that when I grew up, they were always the suit and tie people, when did they become the deplorables? And the Democrats, which were the hippies, are now all of a sudden hipsters out in Silicon Valley with the shirt, the tie. They look like Mark Zuckerberg. When did that flip happen? And I'm gonna tell you when that flip happened. The flip happened when the money started shifting around. So basically, once the corporations started giving money to the Democrats, all of a sudden you take on the look of what your sponsorship is. And this is what I've been saying the whole time. Okay. You are who donates to you. So the Democrats are what donated to them. Okay. And the Republicans are so all of a sudden the Republicans became the deplorables and the Democrats all of a sudden are Wall Street. So there's a complete flip here. And I said it all. Listen, I said it the last election. Donald Trump is not a Republican and Hillary Clinton was not a Democrat. I'm sorry. Hillary Clinton was a Republican in Democrats' clothing, and Donald Trump was Donald Trump. He was not a Republican. He didn't hold to any of the Republican values, at least when he was running. This whole thing was a mess. And that's where we are now. We're in a mess. And even the progressives, look, the progressives in D.C., all the progressive Democrats just voted for Nancy Pelosi. They have nothing in common with Nancy Pelosi. They have none of the same common ground. And this fact that Joe Biden refused to put Senator Sanders on the labor, making him labor secretary because he's afraid Senator Sanders is going to lose the Senate runoff in Vermont. In Vermont, you're going to get a Republican that's going to win the Senate runoff in Vermont. It's such a bunch of nonsense crap, and everyone buys it. And it's like, oh, stop it. In fact, here's the funny thing. So I downloaded this just to show people. So I heard that, and I hope my phone doesn't die. There was a grassroots movement that is the reason why down in Georgia you had things turn out the way they did. Well, here is the grassroots movement in Georgia. Ossoff's top contributors included employees at Google, which contributed $952,000, Apple $295,000, Microsoft $275,000, Amazon $255,000, and Facebook $225,000. That's not grassroots. I'm sorry, that's not grassroots. That's corporate America. That's corporate America voting for a Democrat. So when did this flip come where the deplorables were Republicans and the suits became Democrat? It happened, and the flip happened when the money started going one way and not the other way. So nonsense crap. I love it. All right, I'm going to get through all the comments. I'm going to check in with everybody. I promise you. But this is some of the ridiculousness. And listen, with all of the stuff going on right now with Twitter and Parler, and look, I'm gonna next week. Hopefully, I'm gonna have the launch of what's gonna be the new version of this show. I'm gonna get into all the First Amendment stuff and free speech stuff. But I'm telling you right now, if you're not scared about the restrictions on free speech, okay, if you're not looking at what Merkel and Trudeau and McCormick from Australia and a lot of people are saying about the power of Silicon Valley, you know what? Here's the thing. It seems like it's cool when they're not burning your books, but eventually they're going to burn your books too. So you know what? Is it better to start burning books and hope they never get to your books, or burn no books at all? Me, huge First Amendment guy. Huge First Amendment guy. It's how I started in law. I don't want any books burned. That's my approach to all of this. Speaking of burning books, let's make the shift into comedy. I always like to end on comedy. Now that we have Parler that has been deplatformed, we're going to start seeing, people are going to have to start starting their own conservative websites. You're going to see people starting their own conservative sites where people can go and kind of congregate together. And look, the one thing that we know is Republicans come in all shapes and forms. We saw down in Florida, Cubans voted for Trump in record numbers. We're seeing a lot of people. So it's not this thing that you think it is. It's turned into something else. White women actually helped Biden win. It wasn't blacks. It wasn't Hispanic. It was white women that helped him win. So a lot of groups are going to have to find a new place to go. So I came up with a list. This is my list of potentially the new conservative sites. You guys, so for example, the Jewish people. Jewish people may start a conservative site called Red, White, and Jew. I don't know. It might work. It might not work. The Italians. The Italians are going to start a new social media site. It's going to be called Twitter, which is Twitter, but they pronounce it Twitter. You know, they don't say ER, they do an A at the end. So we're going to go to Twitter. Let's see. The Mexicans, they're going to do a site called Finish the Wall. That'd be funny if there's a conservative site for Mexicans, Finish the Wall. Chinese, their conservative site, number 24. That was so racist, but it's funny. If you don't like it, I don't give a shit. That's why I like First Amendment. But listen, black people in America, there's conservative blacks. They're out there. They're going to have one. America, please. That's going to be their thing. LGBTQ, they're going to have a conservative site, and it's just going to be an eye roll. It's an thing about, and maybe even with the, so it'll be with an eye roll. So those could be the new conservative sites that you're looking for. Let me check in with some of the people here. I got to put on my glasses. I'm sorry, I don't have contacts yet. Jess Savino, hi. Thank you for always checking in. Anita, Kate, Mary Lewis, you're like one of my loyals. I absolutely adore you. Thank you so much. Tracy Dawn's another one always here. Jaman always checks in. Jessica Savino, I voted for Ross Perot. I swear, I voted for Ross Perot twice. I honestly thought when Ross Perot broke in, because of the kind of money he had and being a self-made billionaire, I figured this was going to be the start of the third party. I was all in on Ross Perot. In fact, I tried to join one of the Ross Perot clubs around. I thought it would be great. And I'm going to tell you a story about Ross Perot. So when I met Michael Durant, the helicopter pilot who got shot down in Black Hawk Down, the second helicopter that went down, and that's another thing. More than 2 helicopters went down. A lot of people don't know that story, but in the movie Black Hawk Down, Super 6-4 was piloted by Michael Durant. When I met Michael Durant and I asked him about, who helps the military the most and who he feels, and he said the one person that helped him get his book done and helps the military the most, Ross Perot. Ross Perot donates a ton of money to the military, so I'm glad that turned out to be a good thing. Naomi, adore you, Naomi. By the way, Naomi, who always checks in, her husband, John, is providing the music intro for what's going to be the new look of this. I'm going to call it a show because it's going to be a show, and you guys are going to love what we're doing. It's going to be so much fun. So make sure, Anita, nonsense crap is right. Emily, I was just saying to my husband the other day that Trump is not Republican. Emily, he's really not. He's not a Republican because he's a guy that, look, let's call Trump what he is, okay? Let's get right to the bare bones of what he is. He's a contractor from New York, okay, who donated to both parties, okay? Whether he's a millionaire or a billionaire, he was dating, models, screwing around with porn stars, greasing off whoever he had to do. He played the game, okay? To call that a true Republican, and tie him in with what you normally would look at as Republican values, I'm sorry, I don't see that. In fact, when he was running for the Republican nomination, look, here's what was happening. The Democrats are like, look at this. This is such a shit show. Look, and then as it became less of a shit, they're like, it's still a shit show, right? That's still a shit show. And then they were like, it's Hillary. She's not going to. And then they were like, oh my God, we lost to the shit show. On the Republican side, it was the same thing. They're like, oh, this clown, he's making a mockery of our debates. Someone's going to beat him, right? We're going to be. And then slowly but surely, they started getting knocked off and like, somebody, anybody? And he said it himself. I can stand in Times Square and shoot somebody and you people would still vote for me. In my heart of hearts, I still believe Donald Trump didn't want to win the 2016 election. I think he did it for publicity. I didn't think he wanted to win. And then once he won, I think he got so caught up in the moment. He just, then it became it became like a new thing for him. But listen, I could be wrong. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Tracy Dawn, the laughing faces. I love that you all have laughing faces. I was able to bring it around to comedy at thing. I always try to. That's exactly what I thought. I figured he knew what he was doing. Yeah, look, everybody, we got a week left before Biden comes in. My biggest concerns right now, I'm sorry, it's not impeachment. It's getting these states to get this vaccine out, because right now what I'm hearing is they're holding back doses to make sure that everybody gets the first dose, but they don't have the second dose. And the Pfizer vaccine, you have to get the second dose within, I think, 21 days. Moderna is 29. I don't know if I have those flipped. I know one is 21 days, one is 29. And what they're thinking is, well, look, we're going to get the first, everyone is going to get the initial vaccine. And then, we're going to get the second vaccine out as soon as possible. No, not as soon as possible. It's either 21 days or 29 days. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like, the second, 40 days. 40, no. If we're going to follow science, can we follow science? Or we're going to follow science fiction? Is that what we're going to follow? So, look, that's my concern. My concern is getting people vaccinated, getting this country open again, getting people the money they need, getting people off of breadlines, getting people back to work. It's not making sure the guy who lost the election can't run again in 4 years. Because here's the thing. You want to make it so Donald Trump doesn't run again in 4 years. And I'm talking to the Democrats and the Republicans that right now are thinking about impeachment. How about this? How about if you do your job really well over the next 4 years, no one's going to think about Donald Trump. And here's the other thing about Donald Trump that I know a lot of the Democrats and Republicans don't get. The one thing Donald Trump really loves is people talking about him. The more you talk about him, the more you're going to keep him in the news, the more you're going to make him a threat. So all you're showing me by trying to impeach him is that you're more threatened by him. So this fact that you want to make it so that he doesn't run again shows me you're vulnerable to somebody like him. So rather than trying to make it so that he can never play the game again, how about you just up your game? See, if you're better at your job, you don't have to worry about somebody like that. This is not Hollywood casting where we're going to cast the person that seems to be the best villain. No, no, no. This is an actual thing that if you do your job well, you keep your job. That's the way it works. So get into Congress, get into wherever you're supposed to be, bust your ass, do your job right, and guess what? You're not threatened by anybody running in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever your position is. So that's just me. That's my take. Listen, it's been a half hour. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Vaccine, Chick-fil-A, drive-thru. Yeah, that's what I said last week. Give the vaccine out and put it in a McRib, and everybody will get vaccinated. Next week, I really hope to have the studio set up. And this is going to look really good. We're going to give you a TV show. If I can't get it done next week, it'll maybe take us another week because we have to work out the kinks. We're going to do a run through on Monday, make sure everything works. Actually have a graphic team, actually have a producer, have somebody I'm going to be working with. We still want your emails. We still want your messages. Please, guys, you got to go to YouTube. You got to subscribe to my page because we're going to be slowly moving over from Facebook to YouTube so we can monetize this thing and actually make it a show. So thank you, everybody, for checking in. I got comedy dates coming up in Jersey in March. We're hoping things are going to kind of, level off a little bit. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. See ya.